Hello, everybody. Welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. Today, we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse set to open up on screens starting tonight. I actually have a ticket to go see it this evening, and so I will get back with my review as quickly as I possibly can, and I have some thoughts just about the general Spider-Verse and the general style of animation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the other big news, I think probably the biggest, is that The Little Mermaid, even now the mainstream media, even now, Tony over on Deadline is admitting, hey, there's at least a question mark next to whether or not this movie is actually going to break even. And hey, I'm here to dispel any of the speculation, Tony. This movie is not only going to struggle to break even, it's very likely going to lose quite a bit of money for Disney. And this is something that I actually covered in the Good Morning Asgard podcast yesterday that's live on the channel currently right now. And that is that if you actually look to the films that they have yet to come out and the early numbers that we're getting about them, including films like Elemental, this movie, I think, is a sign that when it comes to their kids-oriented content, right, when it comes to the non-Avatars and the non-Guardians of the Galaxy, they are losing out and couldn't happen to a nicer company. And I have a lot of reasons to why I think this company is starting to lose that family dynamic, starting to lose those family tickets. And we'll talk about that today as well. Before we get further, please smash the like button, live the fire button, Aussie, and smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know when a video live stream goes live on the channel. First, I want to say that today is indeed the first day of June, which means it is the month of the Sacred Heart. So blessed month of the Sacred Heart to everyone out there, and blessed humility month as well. But as you can see, the headline from Deadline, Tony finally coming to his senses. I can't wait to see what excuses he's going to use for this, though. It says, Little Mermaid swimming against strong tides at overseas box office, leaving break even in question. I would say that that is probably the most positive spin you could possibly put on the situation, because if you were honest, you would say Little Mermaid is doing abysmally right now internationally with the outcome and with the coming out of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse this weekend, amidst also the continued success of Guardians of the Galaxy and Fast 10 in the international market specifically. Yeah, this movie doesn't really have a lot of room to swim, and yeah, couldn't happen to a nicer company in this way. As it says right here, in a rare situation for a Disney tentpole, not so much these days. Hold on, Tony, all right? You can say that as if you look back to the entire history of Disney. And this is something that I broke down on yesterday's podcast, was that if you actually look to the Disney Pixar films, you actually notice that the only film, right, for several years, it took many, many years for them to actually have their first flop, and that was The Good Dinosaur, which lost money. After that, it was then Cars 3. And so, therefore, they have not had a lot of them in their rich history. But if you actually break down the most recent times, right, over the last 5 years, they have had much more. They've had many more flops in the last 5 years than they've had in their entire history, right? So a century's worth of films or so, if not more. And they've had more flops in the last 5 years compared to those. But as it says right here, it's giving us some of the numbers. It says, The Little Mermaid looks to bank more at the domestic box office ultimately than overseas, with $300 to $350 million in the domestic market and $260 million abroad. And here's the other thing. I do not think this film is going to get to $260 million abroad. The film opened up to abysmal numbers overseas. I do not see how you could possibly think $260 million is attainable at this point in time, unless you're putting a lot of stock in the fact that it has not released in Japan, and yet you think, hey, Japan gave Aladdin over $100 million back in 2019, maybe they'll show up for this movie. That's not a guarantee. And if we see anything more recently from the Japanese and the other Asian markets, they're not really showing up for this movie or for a lot of other movies that are very similar. It goes on to say, at that level, per finance sources, offer reported $250 million production costs and $140 million global marketing spend. And just as a frame of reference, typical actual marketing is usually, so the reason why the break-even point that I use in my charting is about 2.5 times the budget is because if you actually look at the overall production costs, usually marketing is about whatever half of the budget is added on. So that means that typically for a $250 million film, most studios will spend around $125 million or so. So they actually spent more than that. So the break even that I have for this film is actually a little bit lower than what it actually likely would be based off of typical standards. He goes on to say, The Little Mermaid could very well break even. That's very, very optimistic of you. However, anything in the low $400 million global threshold, and this fish is apt to be sinking to a loss of around $20 million. And again, that is being very, very disingenuous. Even your own charting, even your own breaking down of the biggest box office hits from last year shows you that this $400 million target that you're setting is not realistic whatsoever. I mean, the fact that my numbers and the fact that my target, my break-even point, is considered to be on the low end for a lot of people who study and follow this stuff. Again, you're being very disingenuous with these numbers overall, but this is a huge disappointment, right? It says not a huge disappointment, but a disappointment nonetheless, one film financer told Deadline. No, this is a huge financial disappointment. And we'll talk about why that is the case in a second. But I do want to talk a little bit about Across the Spider-Verse. Again, this film set to come out tonight in the United States and Canada, in the domestic market, but also in other parts around the world. Excited to have a $150 million opening weekend. As it says right here, the $100 million budgeted sequel. Hey, Disney, you need to take a lesson out of the out of the direction of places like Sony and Universal, where when they are making animated films, they're able to make them for $100 million, maybe a little bit more, maybe even a little bit less, and it almost guarantees that they're able to make their money back. When you're spending $250 million on The Little Mermaid, right, on a non-original film, on a modern day adaptation that's only going to appeal to a very small demographic of people, you're just asking to lose money at that point in time. So even though the trailer, we can talk about how there is obviously a lot of identity politics, or at least moments of identity politics in the trailers for this movie. We haven't seen the movie yet, or I haven't seen the movie yet, so I cannot speak to it specifically. However, $150 million is a very strong start based off of and compared to a $100 million budget, especially since this film is expected to make $60 million in the international market. And it says right here that it'll be coming out in Belgium, France, Netherlands, and then it'll be coming out in Australia, Brazil, Germany, Italy, Mexico, and the United Kingdom tomorrow. And then it'll be coming out in other countries after that. So, hey, a very strong start for this movie, especially compared to its overall budget. Looking at Box Office Pro, and this is the reason why Disney should be very concerned, and the reason why The Little Mermaid's box office prospects are essentially none. This movie, right, which remember, does nothing and has been doing nothing internationally and has only been doing something domestically, is expected, according to Box Office Pro, to have a 61% drop. Is expected to make $37 million, bringing its total domestic to $179 million. Now, what's insane to me is that you look at that number right there, and you go back to this article from Deadline. They are saying they think the film is going to end domestically at $300 to $350 million, not to mention the $260 million abroad. Now, here is, I think, the crazy thing about that. How can you possibly look at the $68 million or so it's made internationally after a week? What is that going to get to? Maybe like $120 million at best this coming weekend. You then add to that the fact that it's not doing that well domestically compared to other films. I mean, go ahead and compare this movie to other movies. For instance, we have this comparison between The Lion King and Aladdin. Remember, those are the last two of the quote-unquote live-action film releases that got a full theatrical debut. Some people were trying to point out, well, hey, it did better than Aladdin. Yeah, when you didn't adjust for inflation. Here is using just the numbers calculations, which is actually a little bit behind the current rate of inflation. You'll notice that, hey, Aladdin actually beat it after the first Sunday, beat it even better after the first Monday, and now you look at the first Tuesday, 146 to 130, not even close to the Lion King's numbers there. So to say The Little Mermaid is this huge domestic success is in and of itself not being altogether accurate. Is it doing decent money domestically? Sure, but when you're seeing a 61% drop, for most movies that have a huge mark, right, that have a huge international presence, that's not that big a deal. We see this happen a lot with the Marvel films, right? With the MCU films, with a lot of the huge big budget movies. And typically, they're able to recover from that because they already made a lot more money up front, both domestically and internationally, but they do at least have an international presence. Right now, The Little Mermaid does not have that going for it. So let's just say this is danger territory for Little Mermaid. And for them to say they think it's going to get to $300 to $350 million, I don't see how that's possible, right? I think $300 million would be a cap. And what this film probably will make domestically, we'll have to wait and see what the numbers are going to be, especially since there's going to be a lot of domestic competition for this movie in not just this weekend, but also in the weeks ahead. But yeah, internationally, this film is pretty much donezo. But also coming out this weekend, Spider-Man and Across the Spider-Verse, $115.5 million in its opening. That is very, very impressive. That's a huge number. And the reason why some people might say, well, how is that much more impressive than The Little Mermaid? Little Mermaid made about $95 million in its 3-day opening and over $100 million in its 4-day because of the weekend. Yes, but this is still 115 versus 95 over a 3-day. And also, when you compare this to the opening weekend and the entire box office of the first Spider-Man film, for the first Spider-Verse film, again, that movie made $190 million $190 million domestically, $185 million internationally. So a pretty good almost 50-50 split there, something that The Little Mermaid's not doing. But also, look at this opening weekend. $35.3 million. So this film actually did not have a massive opening weekend. This film also did not make a crap ton of money either, right? It was a success, right? It was cost around 90 million, so adjusting today, probably closer to $100 million. So it was able to make its money back and make a little bit of profit, but it wasn't a huge success. With an opening weekend projected at over $100 million, that is, I think, a very good sign that this movie not only is going to break even probably within the first couple of weeks, because with that $100 million budget, it only needs to make around $250 million to break even. So at $150 million, it's projected to make this coming weekend. I think it'll easily get to that point by week 2. But also, you're looking at this numbers and you're saying, wait a minute, you have these things going on here. You have this film doing so much better. And here you also see from them over at Deadline, they're saying The Little Mermaid is going to see a 58% drop. So they're actually being a lot more optimistic, which is interesting because typically I feel the Box Office Pro numbers tend to be a little bit more positive towards the studio, tend to be a little bit higher. So it'll be interesting to see whose metrics are going to be correct here, right? Is it going to be that 61% drop or that 58%? In either case, right? In either case, because, and again, this is very, very key, because the key and the majority of the funds that are going towards The Little Mermaid, right? The majority of the box office is coming domestically. To see anything north of 50%, as far as holds are concerned, is a death knell for this movie. Because we already know, based off of the very low returns internationally, that that's going to have a massive drop, especially in comparison to, and because of the competition from other movies. But then you add to that the fact that now domestically, it's falling off a cliff. Okay, where is it going to make its money? Where is that money actually going to come from? And right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be coming much from anywhere. And I kind of go back to this chart right here. Aladdin, that film, was able to make worldwide $1.1 billion, right? $700 million in the international market. This kind of start for The Little Mermaid internationally, there's just no way this film is going to come anywhere close to The Lion King or Aladdin. And even domestically, because this film is falling behind Aladdin, right? That means that to say the film's going to get to $350 million, though it's possible, is not necessarily likely either. And the film is only able to get to $300 million or so, and is able to get to, hey, let's be generous, $150 million internationally. Okay, that's far below the $625 million bare minimum it needs to actually break even. So Little Mermaid, I think at this point, and again, we'll have to wait for the full weekend numbers, especially those international numbers to come in. But I think at this point, we can, with a lot of confidence, say Little Mermaid is going to be a flop. So even though they are not going to want to say that over at Deadline, saying, oh, it's just in question. No, I think break even's, the best they can ever hope for, with a flop of how much they're going to lose being the ultimate question. So I'll leave that to y'all. What do y'all think is going to happen to Little Mermaid? Do you think it's going to be a $50 to $100 million flop? I think that's absolutely possible for that to happen because of the numbers that we're seeing. And also, what are your thoughts about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse? I was not a huge fan of the first movie, mostly because of the animation style. I thought the animation style was very jarring and was just very distracting with the stop motion style, at least the stop and go style animation. So the story I thought was actually pretty good. I thought it was actually pretty well made, but that animation style did drive me nuts. And so the fact that they're taking that and it seems like they're going overboard with it, with some of the really weird, almost psychedelic features that the trailers have had, and then also those hints of identity politics throughout the trailers that we've seen so far, does leave me somewhat concerned. But hey, Sony has been able to market their films pretty well and pretty effectively, especially when it comes to the Spider-Man property. So what are y'all's thoughts about that? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, the fire button, smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the month of June of the Sacred Heart, a blessed humility month, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my patrons at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with my patrons over on Patreon, Father Luca Illick, Hymir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, you can check out over at his YouTube channel, Orange Chat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Modern Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check him out over on Twitch, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my local supporters, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. Thank y'all very much for supporting me at that Keep It the Bifrost level and above. And if you want your name shout out at the end of every video and live stream, make sure to check out the top link in the video description in order to get access to that. Also, there's a level where you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with my friend John the Flickpig Flickinger, and also to a giveaways channel on my Discord where you get access to the giveaways of various 4K titles, including right now I've got a 4K Steelbook for Training Day. I got the 7th Seal from Criterion, Plane Trains Automobiles, Kubo and the Two Strings, They Live, Train to Busan, tons of others every single week, every single week. I'm going to stick by that. We're doing this live. I just recently gave away the 3 Steelbook collection for John Wick franchise, the amazing Stash Book Collection version. So if you want to have access to various things like that, hey, check out that top link in the video description below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.